Hello and welcome to Colleague 7 Sprint Review for 18.01.01. This will cover the work undertaken between the 9th of January to the 22nd of January. Beginning with the sprint goal, and for this development period we've undertaken a quality of life sprint, with the focus being on refining existing functionality and addressing known issues based on client feedback. Looking at the high-level items and to explain further, in this sprint we've been able to update the CV download notification, so that includes the candidate name along with a link to the candidate record from within the message. We've updated the go back to search option, which appears when you leave a search result to view a record. This now takes you back to where you were left off actually within the search result, as opposed to returning you to the search criteria of the search. We've added the option to not create situation records when parsing. This is on an individual basis, but there's also a global setting to turn this feature on or off as standard. As part of the GDPR project, we've delivered an entity details report, which will allow you to run an overall data export of a candidate or contact's activity from within the system. We've also been delivering some minor bug fixes, some of which I'll be able to go through in the demonstration. And from an internal perspective, colleague has been doing quite a lot of work with regards to auto test scripting, as well as updating some of our development environments. We'll now go through a short demonstration on the key updates from this sprint. Okay, so the first point I wanted to cover was the update that we've made to the CV download notification, which is triggered when a contact who has received an email from you with a link for a CV has clicked on that link and downloaded the CV. What we'll do to demonstrate this is from a candidate record we'll run the spec CV send to contact workflow. This function though, or notification, would work the same way if you'd run it from a multiple contact send or from a requirement record when sending a CV via that method as well. So it's basically whenever sending a CV to a contact and then clicking on that link. So we'll run this process here to look up a contact record, and that will generate an email here. If I just select one of the templates, you can see the email text there, and we'll choose that candidate's CV. So obviously we've got an email there to be sent to the contact advising that we have a CV for them that's of interest, and obviously with a link to them to download. If we hit send there, that email will then go off, and if I check my inbox, there obviously we have the email with the link there. So what I'll do is I'll click on that link, which obviously begins the download of the CV, the example CV that I sent. And now that's downloaded, what will happen is as we navigate within the system now and essentially leave the record or essentially move to any workflows in the system, what's happening is there's a constant check for fresh notifications which occur, and obviously what we've seen there is a new notification has come in, being triggered as one. And if we click on that, we'll see that the notification says that David Payne, which is the contact, obviously has downloaded the document example CV for Martin Granger, which was the candidate. And both of these are obviously hyperlinked to the contact record and the candidate record. Now we want to refine this further, obviously, in the event of sending from a requirement record, to incorporate a requirement ID and description there, so you can click on to go to the requirement record as well, just to make that notification a fully linkable notification that can take you to all of the associated parties relating to the nature of the workflow. But for now, as it stands, obviously you have the link to the contact and you have a link to the candidate there as part of the notification, and that's the update that we made as part of this sprint. Okay, so the next point I wanted to cover was the go back to search option that's available when you're leaving a search result to go and view the record, and that means to be able to return to the search result and be returned to exactly where you were within that search result as well. So to demonstrate this, if I just quickly bring up a search of just a manageable number of records there for the demonstration, and I'll go on to the second page of the search just to help demonstrate this. So what you can do is there is the option to click on these records, and there's also a setting to either open a new tab or this will open up within the same window. But currently, if you do it via that method, it's not going to give you the option to return to the search result. That is being planned for the next sprint. What you can do within this sprint is either individually or in group. You can click on the select records and then click on view records, and that's how you'll get it to work in the manner that I'm going to demonstrate now. So by clicking on the view records, it will open up obviously the candidate records. You'll be able to move through the candidate records from the search result based on it's sort of queued up those candidate records, and you can now navigate through them based on this next and previous option that you have available. But for all of the candidate records, you're going to have this go back to search option available in the toolbar. And previously, when you clicked on that, it would take you to the search criteria. Now, when you click on the go back to search option, it will take you to the actual search result itself, and specifically the page that you were in. So that's essentially just making that feature work as you would expect it to. I appreciate that, but it's key that you use that button when you're returning back to the search result. If you use just the back button of the browser, we can't control the variables that are needing to be passed back so that it opens exactly where you were. So it's important that you use that go back to search option. But off the back of the next sprint, you'll be able to click on these records and have that go back to search option as well. So that should hopefully help to complete that kind of navigational obstacle that's currently in place at the moment. But that's the update that we made there. The next point to cover relates to the CV parser, or specifically to the option to create a situation record when within the CV parser. So the ability to create situation records was introduced as part of Colleague 7, and that obviously allows for scenarios of recording education and work history that have been specified in the candidate CV. But by the nature of it being a parse, it is obviously guesstimation technology, and in respect of that, it can interpret data incorrectly and suggest situation records which aren't essentially correct and wouldn't be desirable to be created against the record. So what we've introduced now is the option to create a situation record, which is basically a tick box against each situation record that it believes to be correct as part of its parsing process. Now what you can do also within global settings, I've queued up the admin setting here, is that there is an option against a system within global settings for setting that default create situation record to either be yes or no. And if it's set to no, then these tick boxes will not be ticked, and essentially as part of parsing a CV, you can go into the work history or the education and choose to tick which situation records you want to create as part of the parsing process. So you can have it default parse everything as it currently does, or set to no and tick only what you want. So that there's obviously the options there made available to you, and that's the update that's been made as part of this sprint. Okay, so the last point to cover relates to the entity details report. And this is basically the second phase in the GDPR project. So the entity details report will address the right to access element of the legislation. The right to access entitles a candidate or contact that you have on your system to request that they receive a copy of all of their data that you have on your system. So what we provide here is a report mechanism in which you can do that, and by doing so, obviously, it allows you to address that quite quickly in terms of an audit for the candidate or contact. So from the reports menu, we now have obviously the consultant activity report. We've got the requirement activity, but entity details has now been added in there as well. If we click entity details, you'll see the report criteria options appear. You have the option to select either candidate or contact, or select candidate, and then you need to enter the candidate's ID number, the ID number of the record basically, and this is an ID that I know will be relevant for this report, so I've put in there the ID number. You have the option of including history, so you can leave it blank to not include history, or you can include history, and also you can specify a specific date range of the history. So if you only want to send the history of the past 2 years, for example, or the past year, again, that's just an option that's made available to you. On clicking Run Report, it's then going to go away and generate that report containing that data. In terms of the way the report's laid out, it's a very straightforward layout in respect of how it's presenting the data. You essentially have the field names and the actual content data that's in there, and you can navigate through. So all your notes will be pulled through into here. You obviously have up to 5 different sub-note headings that you can have, and they'll also be displayed there. Any skills that you have associated to the record, on the left-hand side is the parent skill, the category that essentially that skill's within, and the right-hand side is the actual skill itself. You have lookups is the name that we've used for custom fields on this system, but essentially this is all custom fields. You have any checklists, any situation records, the requirements that you may have associated with the candidate record, and also any interviews that you may have put the candidate on, so arranged for the candidate. There's a section for placements as well, detailing the specifics of the placement, and of course the final tab is the history. So that's an overview of history records, or history logs more so, that have been created against the record. So there's your basic overview that you have there, and of course what you have is the option to now export that. So what we can do here is export this into Word, and then if we open up the document, you'll see now that within the Word document you essentially have the report in terms of its content, and from here you can obviously amend that as you see fit, apply your logo, but essentially half the battle is won in terms of obviously extracting that data into a easily digestible report format for you to then work with and tailor before you then send it out to the client or to the contact as you see fit. So that's the entity details report, and that will be deployed with the upgrade. If you have any queries or feedback, please do get in touch. I'll be keen to hear from you. Also, for those using Colleague 7, feel free to submit your enhancement requests via the user voice integration. The next video will be the sprint plan for 18.01.02, and as always that will contain a high-level overview on the items we intend to work on during that sprint. Thanks for watching.